Right, now you have all watched the videos and you have been able to now recall the different parts of a plant, and you've also had a look at the video again and you've now learnt what the different parts of the plant do. We're now going to have a go at identifying those parts of the plant on a real plant. So I was really lucky. My best friend sent me some lovely lilies for my birthday. So I've chosen that flower because it was one that I had really easily to hand, but you might find one on your walk. You might have a plant in your garden. It might just be a weed that you've got growing. I know I've got plenty of dandelions growing between the cracks on my patio. So you can find any different plant, and then we're going to have a go at dissecting it, which means to take it apart and to identify the features of the plant. So we've got here, I'm going to start at the bottom. Now at the bottom of my plant, actually I forgot to say, if you get your plant, if you lie it on a piece of card, or if you've got a paper plate or something that's a little bit absorbent, so don't do it on in your home journal, because you might end up getting little bits of dirt or water on it. So this can be on a separate piece of card. I had an Amazon delivery today, and there was some brown paper that was in it, so I've decided to use that. But an empty cereal box would do on the inside of that, or anything you can find really. So I'm going to start at the bottom. Now, because this was a flower that came as a bunch of flowers, at the bottom I would expect to find my root. Now you can see that the stem has been cut a bit here, but at the bottom I know is where I would have found the roots of my plant. So on the bottom of my sheet of paper, I'm just going to write down here, I'm going to write the roots, because that is exactly where the roots would have been if my stems hadn't been cut to fit into my vase. So the roots would be down the bottom. Put a little arrow to down the bottom. Okay, now the next part of my plant that I can see is these that come off the edge. Now because we're dissecting, we can take it apart. So I'm going to take off one of these here, and you can see that this is one of my leaves. So I've got my leaf here, and if you remember, the leaf is really important part of the plant because it uses energy from the sunlight, and that means that the plant can create and use that energy to help the plant to grow. So the reason it's nice and flat is because it means that it's got a bigger area, a bigger surface area for the sunlight to land on, and then the plant can use that to turn it into energy to get it to grow. So I'm just going to pop the leaf there, and I'm going to label my leaf. The leaf. Right, now if I look at another part of my plant, so I think I'm going to just take a bit off the bottom here of my plant. As I'm dissecting it, I'm allowed to do that. It might be that you've got some scissors to help you. In fact, I might just go and quickly grab my kitchen scissors. So I'm going to snip the bottom bit of my stem off, because that was a bit tricky to do with my hands. And here you can see my stem. Now inside the stem there are tubes, and these tubes help to get the water from the soil and the nutrients from the soil, which means sort of like the food that the plant needs from the soil, and they help to suck it all the way up the stem to the leaves and to the flower, the plant, so that it can all grow and be a nice healthy plant. So I'm just going to put this part here, and I'm going to label it the stem. Stem. Now the last part of my plant that I can see is the lovely flower that I've got here. It's a really, really lovely flower. And because I'm dissecting my plant, I'm going to take one of these petals off of my flower. Now the petals are also a really important part of the plant, because quite often, and mine are white, but that's still really bright colour, isn't it? Quite often flowers are really, really brightly coloured. And the reason that they are brightly coloured is because they attract the insects and the bees to come along. And the bees like to sit in the plant and they eat the pollen from it. And this is a very complicated thing that you can learn another time. But the bees visiting the plants basically help the plants to reproduce, so to make more of the plants. So the bees are really, really helpful. So this is a petal, isn't it? And like I said, it's normally brightly coloured to attract the bees. So I'm just going to turn my flower back round. I'm going to pop my petal here. I'm just going to label that part of my plant. The petal. There we go. Now the other thing that you might have noticed when I showed you my flower is that, especially on my flower, which is a lily, you've got these bits here. Now I've got to be careful to touch them because they can leave this yellow substance on your hands, and these things, they are the pollen. So that is what the bees like to come to the plant to see, okay? And the pollen is there, and like I say, that helps the plants to reproduce. So when this pollen is taken by the bees and is used in a special way, it can help the plant to reproduce, so to have another plant grow next to it. It's really, really clever. So I could, if you've got one of these and you want to be extra clever, you could take out one of the pollen stems, and I could put that down there next to my plant, and I could just label that the pollen. So there you can see I've dissected my plant. I know that your plant might have roots that you can actually take off and right next to. Got the roots. I've got my part of the stem that I've dissected. I've got a leaf that I've taken off. I've got the petal, and then finally I also found on my plant a piece of pollen, and I've labelled them all. Now what I also want you to do is underneath, I'd like you to write what the different parts of the plant do. So you've learnt that from the video. If you need to watch it again, then do, and then just write underneath what each part of the plant does, what its function is. Okay, and once you've done that, you can move on to your self-assessment questions and see how much you have learned today. So that is the end of our video for our plant dissecting video, and I can't wait to see what plants you find to dissect and to label the different parts of your plant.